Sega.
Welcome to my new Let's Play of Sonic Lost World. After almost 10 years, this still might be one of the most polarizing 3D Sonic games. A lot of fans really like it, while others can't stand it, so I wanted to go through the game and share my experiences.
Drop the critters, Eggman! If you insist.
Whoa, that's harsh! You'll have to swing back around for it!
Predictable. Very. He must really love those things! We're hit! Whoa! What's that in the clouds?
That must be the Lost Hex! Cool!
Less looking, more landing!
Alright, I can land it, but it's gonna be bumpy.
I have to say, after 2 games that launch straight into gameplay, it is actually really nice having a fancy opening cutscene for Lost World. And it's even a full CG cutscene as well, instead of being in-game. So it definitely makes a very good first impression. In terms of the gameplay, it plays very differently than the games that came before it. By this point, there had been 3 boost games, Unleashed, Colors, and Generations. Lost World throws that formula out the window and goes for something completely different. And from the moment it was announced, it was actually incredibly divisive. It's a lot more of a traditional platformer in some ways, and one of the most divisive changes is there's even a run button. So in this case, this is the PC version, so you have to hold down the right trigger in order to run, otherwise you'll walk like this. We also have red rings returning from the previous games as well. In this case, we have this little bell that I'm pretty sure will give us a red ring. To be honest, even though I've played this game multiple times already, I'm not exactly an expert on it because I have opinions on it, I say as I almost immediately run off a ledge in the very first stage. That is a very promising start to this playthrough. We also have animal capsules that'll give us various animals, and there's also a larger capsule at the end that marks the end of the stage. So in that way, it also feels more like a traditional 2D Sonic game. Next up, we have these little clouds. We can basically press A to get a little bit of extra height if we time it properly. In addition to being able to jump and performing a homing attack as usual, we do have some other classic moves as well, including the bounce attack, though it's actually a lot worse than in the other games because we're limited to 3 bounces by default, though if you're playing the PC version, you can mod out the limit, which I almost would recommend for some of the later challenges. I am using some mods as a heads up. For example, I am using a mod that disables some of the text pop-ups whenever we run into certain items later on. I'll explain more in a bit. And in a lot of ways, this is a very interesting first area. It definitely harkens back once again to Green Hill, even though it's Windy Hill. It definitely still has the checkerboard aesthetic of Green Hill. Next up, we have these little numbers that we have to go through in order. In this case, we don't really have a choice, given that we're on rails here anyway. We don't even get to control our speed here. We're basically locked into one setting there. Next up, we have this little cylinder and a wisp capsule. So the wisps do return from colors. One mod that I am using disables a text pop-up every time that explains how to use the wisp. I personally would recommend disabling that just because it's kind of annoying after a while. In some cases, I actually don't entirely know how the wisps work in this version, so that'll be interesting. Again, since I'm actually more familiar with the Wii U version by comparison. But with that, we should actually be at the end of the stage.
Take it easy there.
Oh, stay calm, little guy. Sonic and Tails will get your
We're on,
buddies
okay?
back. Sonic,
No, it'll be
did you
alright.
get those animals back from Eggman?
Just the one container he tossed off his Eggmobile.
Wait a minute, just the one? Weak. I would have gotten them all back by now.
Save the rest of them.
What? Let me go.
I hate to think what Eggman's doing to those poor things.
I'm on it.
The Lost Hex itself serves as a bit of an overworld. We can go around here, but we can also find various items like extra lives, and next up is Windy Hill Act 2.
Transformation 101. Bunnies to badniks. Boom! Instant army. It needs to be a big army if I'm taking over the world below.
You are quite the mighty conqueror.
Yes, I am. I conquered you, didn't I? And with your help, I'll not only rule the world, I'll finally destroy that blue nuisance, Sonic.
Eggman wants the little hedgehog destroyed.
Yeah, well, I feel like destroying something.
That's what I like about you, Zaz. Always ready for a fight, even before you know what you're fighting.
You bet. Bring it on and I'll rip it up.
Win or lose, I'll learn something about our enemy.
My mistake, there are actually zones in this game. It's always kind of confusing when the series goes back and forth between what's an act and what's a zone, but either way, that is our introduction to not only Eggman in this story, and also the Deadly Six, who we'll be learning a lot more about, unfortunately, in the future. In certain versions of the game, I feel like the red rings are a little bit more helpful. I'm pretty sure they actually tie into an unlock in the Wii U version that's actually omitted from this version. So in the future, I'm not really going to go out of my way for the red rings. If they're not too difficult to get, I probably will stop and pick them up, but in some cases, they're really annoying. To be honest, we have our second wisp here, which is very interesting. It's a void wisp. Basically, as we collect debris, it'll actually get bigger, allowing us to actually pick up more debris and actually jump higher as well. We should have another red ring in here, but first, I think we actually do have to collect some of the rings. Never mind, we actually do have enough height. We can also hover in midair by holding the jump button. I'm trying to remember how these worked in Wii U. I'm pretty sure some of them actually used gyro controls and didn't actually use button controls until a later patch. We also have a very ominous object off in the distance. We'll figure out what that is in a bit, so let's keep making our way through this little 2D section. And we should have our first Deadly Six encounter. This is Zaz, he's the crazy one. All of the Deadly Six kind of fall into a few different tropes, and in general, I find them very interesting, and by interesting, I mean frustratingly one note. In this case, we have to take out his little orb there, and then finish him off as soon as he stops charging. Also, we can actually charge up the homing attack in this game, so it does work a little bit differently in that regard too. So you might notice multiple reticles start to appear after a bit as we are near a certain enemy, like so.
You were lucky this time!
So, next up is Zone 3. In general, Sonic Lost World is heavily based around cylindrical level design, which definitely was also somewhat polarizing at the time, for a few reasons. It definitely drew comparisons to Super Mario Galaxy around this time, and in general, I almost feel like this game falls in a similar category as some other Sonic games of this era, where they kind of lack originality and were kind of copying what Mario was doing. I feel the same way about games like Sonic 4 as well, since that came out right after New Super Mario Bros. So again, a lot of Sonic games end up feeling a little bit reactionary at times, and sort of lack their own identity as a result. Though in this case, I actually do think Sonic Lost World has a pretty strong identity of its own in a lot of ways. And in some ways, I almost feel like the Galaxy comparisons are a little bit overblown, even as someone who's not the biggest fan of this game, but again, we'll have plenty of time to get into my reasons why later on. I will say, I find this a lot more confusing than Super Mario Galaxy. Basically, what I mean by that is, it's a lot more disorienting, because I think part of it's because we're actually going faster than in a Mario game, so in general it ends up being a lot more, mind-bending a little bit, trying to actually keep track of where you are, and like trying to dodge things like this when you're also going faster. Though to be fair, Sonic also goes slower in general compared to a lot of games, which in this case I actually don't mind too much. It feels like a very distinct creative choice to have this be more platforming focused rather than speed focused like Generations, Colors, and Unleashed. They try to fake you out there by having the 2 after the 1. I almost fell for that, but we do get an extra life from that. Also worth mentioning, this game did receive substantial updates for the Wii U version, and all of these obviously were included in the PC version by default. One of the biggest changes to the Wii U version post-launch is that 100 rings gives you an extra life. If you're thinking, wait, that's how every Sonic game is. Yeah, no, that wasn't available in the launch version of the game on Wii U, and was one of the biggest criticisms. I remember having trouble with parts of the game, and I can't imagine actually playing the game with a smaller pool of lives. And we'll definitely get to points where we'll be draining through lives pretty quickly, so that is a very noteworthy change. Also, certain Wisp powers were changed to not use the touchscreen, for example, or the gyro controls, and instead have button alternatives as well. Obviously, that's also the case here, because there is no Wii U gamepad, so we have to use button controls. But this is actually an unusual release, because it's only available on Wii U and PC at the time of this recording. I kind of am surprised by that. You'd think it would be a fairly easy port to other platforms compared to some of the others because it already has a PC version. So yeah, it is actually surprising to me that this never made the jump to any other platforms. But we actually should be getting close to the end here. And finally for this area, we have Zone 4.
Hey, I've been looking for you, Baldy McNosehair. Who are your friends?
Friends? These are nobody's friends. They are the Deadly Six, and they are your worst enemies. Zaz, show this blue pest how you do things up here. With pleasure. I've been itching for a fight all day.
I think you're itching because you need a bath.
Are you disrespecting me?
Maybe.
I'm gonna mess you up! I'd love to stay and watch him disassemble you, but I have business to attend to. I know the perfect spot to take care of you.
That's funny, because I know the perfect spot to kick you.
If it wasn't obvious, Sonic Lost World is by the same writers as Sonic Colors, which is also a fairly polarizing aspect of the series at this point, because the distinct tone shift between Colors and something like Unleashed was very polarizing. Personally, I see merit in Sonic Colors writing, for example, but in this case, I think Lost World pushes some of it a little too far, to the point where I actually am not a big fan of the writing. We'll see more examples of that in the future, but there are plenty of cases where I definitely would have preferred a different story, even though I actually, in some ways, don't mind the gameplay that much. You kind of get used to holding down the R button a lot, though in the case of the Wii U version, holding a gamepad is a lot less comfortable, so I can definitely understand why it would be a lot worse in the Wii U version, as someone who has played that. We also have access to the Spin Dash on ZR, which is unusual. If I'm not mistaken, this would be the first appearance of the Spin Dash proper, and not for, like, drifting, since, like, Sonic 06, if I'm not mistaken, because it wasn't in Unleashed because you have Boost, and yeah, it was only in Generations as a drift mechanic. So yeah, having the Spin Dash back is kind of cool, but again, it almost feels like a very helpful tool in this game because of it being a little bit more old school in level design. I am not concerned about that ring. I'd rather hold on to my extra life that I just got. So we do have some parkour features as well. Basically, if you're running a wall, you can actually grab onto it and kind of run up it a bit. You can also use it to, like, go sideways along certain walls too. It's very clunky, if I'm being honest. I'm not the biggest fan of it, and to this day I still don't quite understand how the parkour system actually works, so I'm not going to be using it that much unless we have to. Here we're now upside down. We're missing another red ring, but again, that's fine. Again, I'm not really concerned about them because they don't really get you much other than the standard unlock from Colors as well. We should be getting pretty close to Zaz at this point. I hear him talking, but actually I'm not quite sure what he's saying. In general, there is dialogue, but it is unsubtitled, so in general I'm not going to stop for them, because I also can barely hear what they're saying. In general, I actually don't remember where a lot of the dialogue is, so I won't be able to, like, predict where it's actually going to come up. So yeah. In general, they don't really say anything that important, to be completely blunt, so I feel like you're not really missing much by not being able to hear them super clearly, because I'm trying to talk over the game. We have another red ring here. I don't know if we have enough time to build up height for this. Barely. And that was red ring number 4, so we've actually missed 3 so far. So we're definitely not doing a great job in this mission. Now we basically have to wait this out. Also, another mod I'm using actually changes the timer. You might notice that it's counting down in a traditional, like, minute format. It actually is in seconds by default, but I actually got a mod that changes it to this, partly because this is actually how the 3DS version handles time. There was a 3DS version that was actually different than the other versions. It's basically a separate standalone release, though it follows the same story and keeps the same locations, but it has completely unique level design. A lot of people find the 3DS version insufferable because of how painfully long a lot of levels are, and to be honest, I've actually never finished it. Well, there's Zaz. He has his little orb again. Now he's launching stars at us. I also feel like this has the same problem as Colors, where it's a 3D Sonic game. It feels very 2D in a lot of ways, so it definitely doesn't feel like a 3D Sonic game in the most traditional sense. So yeah, we're basically dodging all of his attacks for now. Now he's behind us though, so what we want to do is carefully run through this little course before he catches up to us, and then we'll have to see what happens after that. Luckily we have plenty of springs and dash pads to get us through. And now here's the fun part, we get to beat him up. as he throws his little orb. He's vulnerable to attacks, and we'll finish it off.
I can't believe it!
Alright, we good to go or what, Tails?
I've built a TV out of paper clips.
Yeah,
And reprogrammed a supercomputer using dishwashing detergent and a toothpick.
I know.
So look, fixing a propeller on a biplane? That's about as difficult as taking a nap.
Okay, I didn't need your whole life story. A simple good to go would have been cool.
All right. Good to go!
Cool!
With that, we've opened up World 2, and I think we have time for one more level.
These animals are quite underwhelming. I'm disappointed in you incompetent fools. Violently disappointed.
We don't care about your disappointment, Master.
Do you care now? Next time, bring better animals.
So now we're in Desert Ruins, Zone 1. Another major complaint of this game was how formulaic a lot of the levels are. It follows a lot of very familiar tropes in platformers, the grass area to the desert area, and we'll have to see what's after this, of course, but in general, that also did not help with the Mario comparisons, given that the new Super Mario Bros. Series was in a very similar rut at the exact same time. We also need the animals. Later stages are locked depending on how many animals you have. So we do want to go out of our way a little bit to collect some more. Though in general, in this version in particular, we really don't need that many. In the Wii U version, there were also mini-games to get more animals, but because they use the Wii U gamepad's touchscreen, they are not in this version, and all of the animal requirements are actually lowered considerably. And for that reason, I feel like it's actually better, because then you don't have to stop and grind and go through stages multiple times as much. So in general, the PC version has slightly better pacing than the Wii U version. We have these giant worms that will reach up and try to eat us. Luckily for us, we do have the spin dash and other techniques to get us through here without too much trouble. In general, the stage is actually not too bad, other than these, I think, being instant death, so we have to be very mindful of that. In general, the level design isn't awful in this game. I definitely feel like it's a lot more methodical, and in some ways it's fine. We'll see some other examples to the contrary later on, rest assured. But in a lot of ways I do feel like the level design is surprisingly solid, and actually one of the things I don't complain about as much with this game. Again, I have a lot of issues with this game, but level design is not one of them, for the most part. Like the early game I need to specify, and the later game it gets a little bit rough, but we'll see plenty of examples of that later on. We have another wisp here, which will let us fly through, and of course, this only used the gamepad's tilt controls in the Wii U version. It actually wasn't possible to use the Pro Controller in that version, even when they patched in button controls later on, because certain things like tutorial prompts are actually accessed through the touchscreen, while in this version they're accessed using, I think, minus, but we're not going to do that because I've already played the game before, and generally know what I'm doing. I say as I'll probably screw up a lot towards the back half of this game, so I'll definitely eat my words as we go along here. We'll dodge all of the worm's attacks, and I'm trying to remember how much is left. I think we're probably getting pretty close to the end, though we do have another indoor section over here. I do like how this does shift a lot between 2D and 3D, but again, it does have that problem of almost feeling more 2D like colors, rather than having a more fair ratio of the two. In general, I don't really mind having 2D sections in Sonic games, I almost just feel like they need to be used more sparingly. Also, you can spin dash up walls, so if you're about to slide down, you can get a little bit of extra height. Alright, so we have to very carefully make our way up here and dodge the worms along the way. We're not concerned about this life. I actually think we'll barely have enough time to make that cycle, as is. And once again, we'll ride up this platform, carefully jumping out of the way of the worm once again. And because of our parkour, we can actually skip quite a bit of this section here. And from here, we have to go up a little bit farther towards the end of the stage, I think. At least I think we're getting pretty close to the end. Again, the parkour system is cool, it's just kind of unwieldy at times. Sometimes I definitely jump in the wrong direction, so we'll have to see how it goes later on as the challenges get a little bit more difficult. I did do a practice playthrough of the game before this Let's Play, and I'm just going to say now, it was a thing in terms of how the controls sometimes worked out. We barely dodged the worm there, but with that we should have a little bit more to go before the end. We have to dodge all of these little cacti and more of the worms, and continue making our way past here. We also have quicksand to worry about, which is obviously not great. Even with someone as fast as Sonic, we can definitely get tripped up by that pretty easily. So we also have spikes to deal with. We had a bell in the background, but again, I'm not overly concerned about red rings, so we'll just kind of get them as they're convenient. Next up, we have this little narrow path that we can luckily jump over and helping attack the enemy to get past really easily, and we have a few more obstacles before the final animal capsule. So, next time we'll head to Desert Ruins Zone 2, a very notorious stage, so we'll have to see how that goes. So, thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time for more Sonic Lost World.